I opened the double glass doors to the vineyard terrace, letting in the soft scent of crushed grapes and dry summer wind. The hills stretched for miles, a ripple of sun-soaked gold and green under a cloudless California sky. It had taken me 10 years, but I was finally here, standing on the same estate I used to hide behind as a forgotten daughter, only this time it was mine. My name is Celeste Romero. I'm 35. 10 years ago, my family told me I'd never amount to anything when I dropped out of law school. Last month, Forbes named me one of the top 30 under 40 in tech investing. Funny how silence and exile can become fuel when you learn to light the match yourself. I took a sip of espresso from my ceramic mug, the word Romatech Ventures embossed in gold on its side, the firm I built from scratch after my first startup exit. My phone buzzed. Remington, my security chief. They're on the road. ETA 12 minutes. I smiled. Perfect. You see, my family never formally invited me to this year's reunion. Not that they ever did. For the past decade, I only found out about those annual cherished traditions through secondhand photos or gossip Marina forgot to hide. They thought the vineyard was theirs. It had been in our family for 3 generations, until last year's debt spiral, when the bank called me. Quietly, desperately, and I bought it, in cash, under a holding company. I didn't say a word. I let them plan their reunion here like they always did, like I was some shadow they'd shaken off. But now, that shadow owns the sun. A voice crackled through the terrace intercom. Incoming, Remington announced dryly. And they brought extra guests. Looks like Blake brought that influencer girlfriend. Again. I set my cup down, inhaled the vineyard air, and adjusted my cream blazer. The buttons were mother of pearl. The heels, Jimmy Choo. The posture? Built from 10 years of being overlooked. You know what's funny? I murmured, mostly to myself, stepping back inside the cool stone foyer. They always said I didn't understand the value of family tradition. I smiled. But I'm the one who saved it. A chime echoed through the house as the main gate clicked open. Neve's voice pinged in my earpiece. Want me here for backup? No, I said, watching the dust trail snake up the long gravel road toward the estate. This is something I need to do alone. I walked down the marble staircase toward the front doors. The same staircase I'd cried on when Marina won her first mock trial, and Mom told me I should try to be more like her. The same hall I'd been told I was too intense, too ambitious, too not right. I opened the sleek smart lock, waited as the convoy of 2 SUVs and a Tesla pulled up, and stepped forward just as the first door slammed. Marina was first out, naturally, in a linen jumpsuit and that perfectly staged scowl she used when things didn't go her way. Blake emerged next, barking into a Bluetooth headset about mergers he'd never actually closed. Then Mom, Eleanor, sunglasses the size of her regrets. And finally, Dad, Richard, looking like someone who'd rather be anywhere else. I waited until they were all out, bags in hand, smiles forming, until Mom pulled out her old brass key and click. Nothing. She frowned. Tried again, then again. Her smile flickered. Is there something wrong? I asked, stepping into view. 4 heads turned at once. Mom squinted. Celeste? Looking for something? I asked, my voice calm, smooth. She looked at the key, then at me. What are you doing here? I live here, I said simply. This is my estate. Blake scoffed. That's impossible. Is it? I tilted my head. Would you like to come in? Marina stared at me, stunned. You live here? I stepped aside, letting the golden light spill across the stone. Please. After all, you did plan a family reunion here, didn't you? Their silence was better than champagne. I smiled. Welcome to the house you thought I'd never belong in. They followed me in slowly, as if unsure whether the floor would give way beneath their feet. The foyer had changed. Gone were the old oil paintings of Eleanor's ancestors, the dark mahogany furniture, the outdated wallpaper. In their place, minimalist art, sleek stone accents, and soft, ambient lighting. The space looked like it had been torn from the pages of Architectural Digest. Because it had. Marina's heels clicked against the polished travertine as she scanned the room. "Where's the chandelier?" she asked, frowning. "In storage," I said. "I replaced it with recessed LEDs. You'd be surprised how much electricity that monstrosity wasted," Blake grunted. "This doesn't look like the Romero estate." "That's because it isn't anymore," I replied coolly. "This is Terra Celeste now, vineyard and residence, owned and operated by me." Mom froze in the doorway, her sunglasses slipping to the tip of her nose. "Celeste, this isn't funny." "I wasn't trying to be." Dad cleared his throat, speaking for the first time. "You're saying you bought this place?" I walked toward the open-plan kitchen, where the scent of fresh espresso still lingered. "I didn't say it. The deed does. Would you like to see it?" Marina's eyes narrowed. "But how? This house was in foreclosure." "Exactly," I said, opening a leather folder on the counter and pulling out the documentation. 3 months behind on payments. Property taxes delinquent. Your precious family legacy was about to be sold off to the highest bidder. Blake's jaw tensed. "So you swooped in and took it from us?" "No," I corrected. "I saved it. Something none of you were willing or able to do." Mom walked further in, slowly, her eyes darting around the room like she didn't recognize the place anymore. "I had no idea it got that bad." "Because you never checked," I said, pouring myself another cup of coffee. "You all assumed someone else would handle it. You assumed I was still failing, still floundering, still that disappointment you quietly left off the holiday cards." Marina opened her mouth, then shut it. She walked over to the French doors leading to the terrace and stopped dead in her tracks. "Is that a helipad?" I smiled. "Yes. Sometimes I fly in from Palo Alto when I don't feel like driving." Blake let out a short laugh, though it lacked any humor. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" They stood there in awkward silence, the kind that presses in on your skin and makes you aware of every breath. I sipped my coffee and waited. "So," Dad finally said, adjusting his shirt collar, "what happens now?" "Now," I said, closing the folder with a soft snap, "we have a conversation. About the reunion. About the estate. About where we all stand." Marina's voice was sharp. "You can't just lock us out of our own family home." "Oh, but I can," I said calmly. "And I did." Blake threw his bag onto a nearby chair. "This is ridiculous. What kind of stunt is this?" "No stunt," I said, walking toward the dining room. "This is ownership. Something I earned. Something you all said I wasn't capable of." They followed me like tourists through a private museum. In the dining room, the long wooden table remained, but had been refinished, surrounded by high-backed Italian leather chairs. A decanter of wine sat in the center, glinting in the afternoon sun. I took the seat at the head of the table, the same seat Dad used to claim. "Sit," I said simply. Reluctantly, they did. "I know you're wondering why I didn't tell you," I began, folding my hands in front of me. "Why I never called, never bragged, never asked for recognition." "I'm wondering a lot of things," Marina muttered. "I didn't tell you because you never asked," I continued, voice steady. "For years I tried to share, about the software startup, the acquisition, the venture fund. But every conversation somehow ended up about Blake's latest disaster or Marina's weddings." "It was one wedding," Marina said defensively. "3 engagement parties," I shot back. "Only 1 actual marriage." Mom finally spoke, her voice brittle. "You should have told us what you were doing." "Why?" I said, locking eyes with her. "So you could find new ways to diminish it? Laugh behind my back? Or worse, pretend to care while still excluding me from everything?" The room went quiet again. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down. A text from Neve. "Press just picked up the Singapore keynote. You're trending." I didn't respond. I looked up at my family. the same people who never saved me a seat at the table, and said, "Now, let's talk about what happens next." The silence at the table felt like a vacuum, swallowing every ounce of noise and comfort. Marina stared at the stem of her wineglass as if it had betrayed her. Blake bounced his knee rapidly, jaw clenched, his eyes darting between me and the newly renovated dining room. Dad rubbed the back of his neck, while Mom picked invisible lint off her sleeve. A nervous tick I remembered from childhood arguments she pretended not to hear. I let them stew. Finally, I rose from my chair, heels echoing against the stone floor. "Would you like to see what you nearly lost?" I asked. No one answered, but they followed anyway, like they always did when someone else led. I guided them through the estate, room by room, narrating every crack in the foundation, every splintered beam, every unsafe outlet, every hidden termite colony I had found when I took over. The place had been a shell when I bought it, beautiful from afar, but empty and dangerous inside. Like our family, I thought. "Renovation costs?" Blake asked, voice tight. "North of 600 grand, I replied. "Not including the tech integration, the helipad, or the vineyard automation system." "You installed automation?" Dad blinked. "I installed a future," I said simply. We stopped at the sunroom, once Grandma Lucia's favorite space, now redesigned with glass walls that opened fully to the vineyard, letting in sunlight, breeze, and the illusion of openness, something my family never quite mastered. "You remember when I wasn't allowed in here?" I said quietly, touching the newly polished window frame. "Because I'd spilled grape juice on the couch cushions when I was 6? Mom shifted uncomfortably. "That was a long time ago." "Time doesn't change patterns," I said. "It only exposes them." I turned and headed toward the library, now transformed into a sleek office with a digital command center, wine cellar access, and a private conference screen used for global Zoom calls and investor briefings. "This is where I closed the partnership with the Singapore Sovereign Fund," I told them. "It's also where I watched each of you ignore my birthday last year. Again." Blake sighed. "You're really going to make us walk through a guilt museum?" "No," I said, pausing to face them fully. "I'm going to make you understand that while you were celebrating each other, I was rebuilding everything this family failed to preserve." We returned to the dining room. I sat. They followed. Again. Dad broke the silence. "We didn't know how bad things had gotten." "You didn't care to know," I corrected. "You thought this place would always be here, that someone else would fix it, that someone else would pay, just like you always thought someone else would raise me while you focused on Blake's bankruptcies or Marina's never-ending degrees." Marina's mouth twisted. "I worked hard for those." "So did I snapped. "The difference is, no one ever asked me about mine." I pulled out a tablet and tapped a few times. The screen lit up with before and after photos of the estate. Leaky ceilings, mold-blackened walls, rotten staircases, broken plumbing. Then, glass wine racks, chef's kitchen, engineered vineyard paths, and an outdoor event space booked through next year. Mom covered her mouth. "I didn't do this for you," I said. "I did it in spite of you." Blake leaned forward, eyes on the photos. "So what now? You flaunt this forever? Hold it over our heads?" I smiled. "Why not? You held shame over mine for years." Dad stood. "Enough, Celeste. This bitterness, it's not healthy." I stood too. "Neither is abandonment, Dad." "But it didn't stop you." He froze. My phone buzzed again. "Neve." "Press wants to confirm keynote Q&A. Time to pick your talking points." I typed a quick reply. "Use the legacy and reinvention theme. Fits perfectly." I looked up. "By the way, I'll be delivering the keynote at the Global Tech Summit next month. Singapore. The same week as the official reunion." Mom blinked. "So you won't be here?" "No, but I've arranged something else." Their heads turned toward me in unison. "I've reserved the top suites at the Castello Grande Resort," I continued. "Full vineyard access, spa privileges, and private tastings." Marina's eyes widened. "That's incredibly expensive." "I know," I said. And it's prepaid, non-refundable. Blake looked at me warily. Why are you doing this? Because, I replied, swirling the wine in my glass, you're going to experience what it's like to be guests in the legacy you left behind. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Don't cry, Mom, I said gently, but without softness. Save it for the next tour. The weight of their silence hung in the air long after I sat down again. Mom's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass, but didn't drink. Marina looked stunned. Blake was the first to speak, of course. So what? You've been spying on us this whole time? He said, with that defensive smirk he always wore when the truth got too sharp. I didn't need to spy, I replied. You all broadcast enough without realizing who was still listening. Dad exhaled slowly. You're still angry. Angry? I laughed. Short, clipped, bitter. No, angry was 10 years ago. Angry was graduation day, when none of you showed up because Marina had a court reception and Blake had a pitch meeting with a fake investor. Angry was when I sent a letter about my scholarship to NYU Business and never even got a congrat. Mom looked up. What scholarship? I froze. What do you mean, what scholarship? I never saw that letter, she said, confused. Are you sure? My stomach dropped. You were the listed contact. It was sent to our house. Full tuition. Early admission. It was supposed to be the moment that changed everything for me. Marina paled. I turned sharply to her. What? She hesitated. That year, you were staying with a friend during spring break, right? I remember intercepting a letter addressed to you. Dad gave it to me and said it wasn't important, that it was a scam. Dad looked stunned. I don't remember that. You never do, I said flatly. Marina swallowed. I didn't open it. I just assumed. You assumed I didn't deserve options, I snapped. You all decided what I was allowed to reach for, and quietly clipped my wings behind the scenes. No one denied it. I pulled my phone from my pocket and placed it face up on the table. A still image filled the screen. My face on the front page of the Financial Tribune, under the headline, Meet the Woman Reshaping Global Cybersecurity. They all stared. I could have announced it, I said. I could have sent links, press releases, interviews. But I realized something. I tapped to the next image, a photo from a reunion 2 years ago. Everyone was smiling, wine glasses raised, the vineyard behind them. I wasn't in it. You didn't just forget me. You made room in your lives by erasing me, I continued. And now you're shocked that I returned not as your daughter or sister, but as your landlord. Dad leaned forward. It was never meant to be like this. Then what was it meant to be? I asked, my voice rising. Was I supposed to wait forever for your permission to matter? No one answered. Let me help you, I said coldly. You built your family narrative around Blake's entrepreneurship and Marina's legal brilliance. Meanwhile, I built a venture capital fund, took 3 startups public, and sit on 2 international policy boards. I did all of it while you forgot I existed. Mom whispered. That can't be true. It is, Neve said from the hallway. All heads turned as she entered, tablet in hand, expression unreadable. Sorry to intrude, she said, placing the tablet down and projecting a slideshow onto the wall. But Celeste gave me clearance to share this. On the screen, footage of Celeste speaking at Stanford. A room full of executives. Applause. Then a photo of her and Declan Ward, her mentor, shaking hands after signing a $118 billion merger. Then a clip from a podcast. I was underestimated for most of my life, Celeste's voice said calmly. That taught me how to outmaneuver expectations. Marina looked devastated. Blake finally sat back, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Dad pressed a hand to his forehead. I didn't want to humiliate you, I said softly, rising. I just wanted you to know. Know what? Mom whispered. That I made it, I said. Without your blessing, without your support, without your belief. Tears welled in Mom's eyes, but I didn't stop her this time. Let her feel what absence does. We have dinner reservations tonight at the Costello, I said, standing tall. But the real reunion? That's tomorrow. What happens tomorrow? Dad asked. I turned toward the doors, smiling faintly. You'll see. The Castello Grande was glowing. Golden sconces flickered against sandstone walls, and wine glasses sparkled like cut crystal beneath the soft lighting of the private dining salon. The room was quiet, expensive, and so far above anything my family had ever experienced that they looked like impostors in rented elegance. Blake kept tugging at his ill-fitting blazer. Marina's hair was curled to perfection, but her eyes darted around, unsure. Dad looked dazed, and Mom was quiet, clutching her menu like it might explain what the hell was happening. The maitre d' arrived with practiced grace. Good evening, Ms. Romero. We've prepared the private terrace for dessert service, as requested. Thank you, Mark, I said with a small nod. His eyes flicked briefly toward my parents. Would you like the wine list? Already selected, I replied. Vintage '07 Cabernet, bottled on this property before we lost it the first time. Marina flinched. The first course arrived. Heirloom beet salad with goat cheese mousse. I barely touched it. The air was too thick with anticipation. I could feel the moment building like a storm over dry hills. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen. Declan Ward. Press has dropped. You're live. I smiled to myself, then stood and raised my glass. To family. I said, voice clear but edged with steel. Even when forgotten, we somehow find our way back to the table. They awkwardly raised their glasses. Then I walked over to the large flat screen near the wine cart and tapped the remote. The screen flickered on. A sleek news anchor appeared, her voice crisp and excited. In breaking business news tonight, Forbes Business Weekly has just named tech investor Celeste Romero the most powerful woman in cybersecurity for 2025, following a record-breaking acquisition deal with the Singapore Sovereign Innovation Fund. I turned the volume up. Romero, founder of Romatech Ventures, has been quietly shaping the global tech landscape. The 35-year-old is set to deliver the keynote at the Global Tech Summit in Singapore, becoming the youngest female executive to helm a portfolio of this size. Blake's fork hit his plate. Marina turned completely pale. According to industry insiders, her deal is projected to disrupt the cybersecurity sector across Asia, Europe, and North America. She is also rumored to have purchased and restored a historic vineyard estate in Napa Valley. I pressed pause. The screen froze on my face. Polished, poised, confident. The version of me they never saw because they never looked. You planned this, Dad said slowly. Of course I did, I replied. Blake leaned forward. You just wanted to humiliate us. No, I said. I wanted the truth to be louder than your silence. Mom's hands trembled in her lap. You're really moving to Singapore? Yes, I said, lifting my glass again. But not for revenge, for opportunity, for evolution. I turned back toward the screen and let it play. Behind me, the news clip rolled on. Romero, who has remained notoriously private, stated in an interview last week, sometimes, family isn't the people who raised you. Sometimes, it's the people who believed in your vision when no one else would. Neve appeared at the door just as the anchor transitioned to another segment. She held up a newspaper, tomorrow's early edition of the Financial Tribune. She laid one copy in front of each person at the table. My name was bold across the top. The Phoenix of Tech, how Celeste Romero rose from rejection to global influence. Dad turned the paper over in disbelief. How did we not know? Because you didn't ask, I said. Not once. Blake stared at me, genuinely baffled now. You had all this, and you never reached out? I reached out every time I showed up and was ignored. Every text that went unanswered. Every invite that never came. Every time you said you were too busy to call. I smiled coldly. Now you're not too busy. Now you're just too late. Marina blinked hard, her voice small. So what now? I looked around the table, at the people who had underestimated me for decades, and I said what I'd been waiting to say for years. Now I lead. The room went quiet again, but this time it was the silence of something ending, and something else just beginning. The morning sun painted the resort in soft gold as I sipped my coffee alone on the private balcony. Below, the vineyard stretched in gentle waves toward the valley. Somewhere near the spa, I could hear Trinity's kids laughing. Not mine, of course. I never married, never trusted enough to. Success gave me power, but it didn't give me peace. Not yet. A knock came at the terrace door. I turned. Mom stood there, holding something in her hands, a small, weathered wooden box. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice gentler than I remembered. I nodded once, gesturing toward the seat across from me. She sat carefully, as if unsure of her right to be there. Her eyes scanned the view, then landed on the box in her lap. "I found this in our attic," she said, "hidden under some of your father's old files. I kept it, even when I told myself I didn't." She opened the lid. Inside were faded report cards, school essays, a ticket stub from my first pitch competition, a dried rose I didn't remember keeping, and at the very bottom, the program from my MBA graduation, the one they missed because Marina had a more important court date. "You kept these?" I whispered. "Every single one," she said. "But I didn't want to encourage your dreams. I thought, if I did, you'd go too far. You'd leave. You'd succeed." I stared at her. "And that scared you?" "Yes," she said. "Because I settled, and you didn't." I looked away, heart pounding. "You know," she continued, "I didn't even know how to Google your company. I only learned it last night from that article. You've built something extraordinary." I said nothing. She placed the box between us. "I don't expect forgiveness, Celeste, but I needed you to know I was proud. I was just too proud to say it." The words landed like a stone in a still lake, rippling, unsettling. Before I could respond, another knock came, this time from the hallway. Neve peeked in. "Sorry, but your brother and sister are downstairs. They want to talk." I almost laughed. "Of course they do. Now." "I can send them away," Neve offered. "No," I said after a moment. "Let's get it over with." 5 minutes later, Marina and Blake sat on the same couch where I'd just heard a half-confession of buried pride. Blake was holding a manila envelope. Marina looked uncharacteristically hesitant. He cleared his throat. "Look, this isn't a bribe or anything, but we talked. And if you'll let us, we want to help maintain the vineyard." I raised an eyebrow. "You want to invest?" He nodded. "All of us. Mom, Dad, Marina, me? Equal contribution, for real." I didn't respond. Marina leaned forward. "And I've deferred my next firm partnership offer. I was thinking, maybe I could visit you. In Singapore. Actually get to know my sister." I studied her carefully. "Why now?" "Because," she said, "for the first time, I saw who you really are. And it made me realize how little I've ever seen you before." Blake opened the envelope and slid the papers toward me. "It's not much compared to what you've done, but it's something. A beginning." I didn't touch them. "You know I don't need the money," I said. "We know," he replied. "That's what makes this real." Mom reached into the wooden box and pulled out a small brass key. "I kept this," she said softly. "Your key. From the old house. I thought, maybe you'd come back someday." I stared at the key, unmoving. "Celeste," Marina said gently, "you don't owe us anything. Not forgiveness, not another minute. But if you want to try, we're here." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the one with the power to choose, and that terrified me. Neve stood quietly by the window, letting the moment settle. I finally picked up the key. Then I looked up at them all and said, "I'm still going to Singapore." "We know," they answered in near unison. "And I'm still angry," I added. "You should be," Blake said. "But that doesn't mean we stop trying." Mom wiped a tear from her cheek. We won't waste the chance. Not again. I stood and walked to the glass doors. The morning breeze was warm against my face. I want the reunion to alternate, I said, not turning around. Singapore next year, here the year after. And you'll all need passports. Behind me, the tension broke like a dam. Marina laughed through her tears. Blake dropped his head and let out a half-choked laugh. Mom smiled like she hadn't in decades. I turned back to them slowly. But not because you've earned it, I said clearly. Because I choose it. There's a difference. By the time the town car pulled up to the front of the Castello Grande, my bags were packed, the suite cleared, and the view of the vineyard bathed in soft, honeyed light. I stood by the window for a final moment, gazing out over the rows of vines I had once run through barefoot, chasing a family that never slowed down for me. Now they were here, slowed, still, trying. Neve zipped up my final suitcase and joined me at the glass doors. Ready to build an empire from a skyscraper? I smirked. One continent at a time. We walked down the hall together. Outside, the black Mercedes sedan gleamed under the rising sun. The driver held the door open. Before I stepped in, I heard footsteps behind me. Celeste! It was Marina. She jogged to catch up, blazer flapping slightly, hair windblown. A rare sight for someone usually so controlled. Behind her came Blake, then Mom and Dad. They weren't chasing me. They were walking with me. For once. Marina reached me first. I know you're flying out, she said, slightly breathless, but we wanted to see you off. Blake handed me a bottle of wine wrapped in a ribbon. The 2007 cab, he said. The let real vintage we bottled before it all went south. You should have the final one. I took it gently. Thank you. Mom stepped forward next. Her eyes were tired but softer. I asked the concierge to print this, she said, offering me an envelope. I opened it. Inside, a photo of the 5 of us, taken just this morning, standing in front of the vineyard gates. Not posed, just together. You never got to be in the family photos, she said. So I thought maybe we'd start with this. My throat tightened, but I said nothing. We're not asking to be forgiven, Dad said, speaking for the first time that day. Just remembered. I met his eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't look away. You'll get updates, Marina added. Texts, photos, proof we're serious. And if I don't respond? I asked, folding the photo carefully. Blake grinned. Then we keep sending them anyway. That's what you do for family, right? You try, even when it's awkward. I nodded once. Then I turned to Neve. They're learning, she smiled. Slowly, but sure. I hugged Marina first. It felt stiff at first, then real. Blake next. Awkward, one-armed, but sincere. Mom last. She held on a second too long. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I know, I replied. It's not the words I needed then, but I'll take them now. Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. Come back when you're ready, not when we expect it. I offered a small smile. That's the only way I do things. Then I slid into the car. As it pulled away, I looked out the tinted window. My family stood at the edge of the driveway, not waving, not crying, just watching. Present, awake. A year ago, they would have already turned away. Now they stayed. Neve tapped her phone beside me. Board meeting in 20 hours. You'll be in the air for 15. I'll draft the deck in flight, I replied. You always do. As the estate faded behind us, I thought of the keys in my pocket. The old brass one from my childhood and the new digital fob that controlled the estate gates. Both now mine. Both symbols of past and present. What if they backslide? Neve asked quietly. What if this was all performance? I looked ahead, past vineyards, past morning light, toward the long road winding toward the future. Then I keep moving, I said. But at least this time, I gave them the map. The airport terminal was alive with quiet motion, clicking heels, rolling luggage. voices softened by the high ceilings and filtered sunlight. I stood at Gate 21A, watching as the boarding screen flashed. Singapore Airlines, Flight 11, non-stop to Changi International. Boarding now. I could have flown private, of course. I often did. But today, I wanted something different. I wanted the rhythm of normalcy. The quiet pulse of real people moving forward. Like I was one of them. Like I hadn't spent years being left behind. Neve was standing nearby, double-checking my itinerary on her tablet. The penthouse in Marina Bay is ready. Concierge stocked it with your favorite coffee and blackout curtains. Perfect, I said, adjusting the strap on my carry-on. And the team from Singapore Ventures? Prepped for the Monday brief, she confirmed. But they're already celebrating. That Forbes bid boosted our pre-merger valuation by 12% overnight, I smirked. Let them enjoy it. They don't know what's coming. Behind me, the terminal buzzed with low conversation. I could hear a familiar sound. Trinity's voice. Marina, laughing. Far away, but real. I turned to Neve. Do you think they'll change? She paused. I think they're trying. That's more than they ever did before. I nodded. Not because I believed it would last, but because I believed in myself more than I ever had them. My phone buzzed. A photo message from Mom. It was us. Me, Marina, Blake, Dad, all standing in front of the gates of Terra Celeste. The morning light cast us in a glow that almost looked like peace. Underneath, she wrote, We're planting new vines today. Blake says they'll be ready for harvest in 3 years. Come back when they bloom? I didn't reply. I simply saved the photo and tucked my phone into my blazer pocket. The gate attendant called for boarding. Neve turned to me, lifting her brows. Ready? I looked around the terminal, at the endless movement, at the families, the business travelers, the children tugging their parents' sleeves, at the horizon visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bright, open, waiting. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. I stepped onto the jet bridge, with my heels echoing behind me like punctuation marks on the last page of a very long book. As we reached the aircraft door, the flight attendant smiled. Welcome aboard, Ms. Romero. Your seat is prepared. I slid into 1A, set my bag beneath the console, and looked out the window. The vineyard, the letters, the silence, the lost chances, the graduation they missed, the whispers. The way they said she's just difficult. The nights I cried wondering why I was never enough. All of it led here. The seatbelt sign dinged. The engines began to hum. The jet started to roll. And as the ground shifted under me, I closed my eyes and saw not what I'd left behind, but what I was about to build. A legacy that didn't need permission. A future that didn't seek approval. A life that was no longer proof. It was mine. The plane lifted. I watched the sky open, watched California fall away beneath a layer of clouds and distance. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the old brass key. The one from my childhood. The one Mom gave me back. I turned it over in my hand once. Then, without hesitation, I dropped it into the silk-lined drawer beneath my seat. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need to carry it anymore. What was your favorite moment in Celeste's story? Was it the shocking family reveal at the vineyard? The news broadcast at the Castello Grande? Or the quiet moment she dropped the key on the plane? Share your thoughts in the comments. And tell us, have you ever chosen to rise instead of return?